I never imagined that at 62 years old, I would be driving through the unfamiliar streets of Naperville at 11 o'clock at night. My hands, adorned with the simple gold wedding band I had worn for 40 years, were trembling on the leather steering wheel. My heart wasn't just beating, it was hammering against my ribs, a desperate prisoner trying to escape a cage of denial. It all began 3 hours ago. It was a Tuesday. Richard, my husband, had called me precisely at 5 p.m., just as he always did from his office. "It's going to be another late one, Ellie," he'd said, his voice laced with that familiar, practiced exhaustion that always elicited my sympathy. "This New York merger is killing us." "I'll be with the team until midnight at least. Don't wait up." I'd made my usual supportive noises, told him I loved him, and hung up, feeling that familiar dull ache of loneliness. Our beautiful, empty house in Lake Forest felt cavernous on nights like these. Around 8 p.m., I was looking at the silent kitchen and decided to do something spontaneous. I'd drive downtown, surprise him with his favorite meal from Gibson's Steakhouse, a medium-rare ribeye and their loaded baked potato. Maybe we could share a quiet 10 minutes in his corner office, a small connection in his overwhelming schedule. It felt like a good wifely thing to do. I drove my Lexus from our comfortable, quiet suburb, navigating the familiar 30-mile route to his imposing financial skyscraper in downtown Chicago. The city skyline was glittering, as always. But as I turned the corner onto Wacker Drive, my stomach dropped into a cold, dark pit. The building was dark, not just his floor, but the entire monolith. The lobby was empty, the security desk unmanned. A digital notice scrolled across a massive screen in the entryway. "Building closed effective 6 p.m. for scheduled system-wide maintenance. All offices will reopen 8 a.m. tomorrow." My first thought was confusion. He must have moved to a temporary office. I had the wrong building. But no, there was the massive brushed steel logo of his firm, Vance Capital, gleaming mockingly under the streetlights. My fingers, now cold and clumsy, fumbled with my phone. I dialed his number. He answered on the third ring, his voice low and rushed. "Can't talk, honey. I'm in the middle of it." "How's the merger coming, my love?" I asked, my voice dangerously light, a thin veneer of normalcy over a chasm of sudden, sickening fear. His answer was immediate, smooth as polished glass. "Swamped, Ellie. Just swamped. The Tokyo team is on the line. It's a nightmare. Can't talk. I'll see you in the morning. Love you." Before the click, I heard it. It wasn't the sterile beep of a conference call. It wasn't the sound of stressed executives. It was a sound I knew intimately, a sound that had no place in a late-night merger discussion. It was a soft, feminine laugh, muffled, followed by a low, indistinct murmur. My blood turned to ice. My stomach lurched, and the expensive steak I'd bought grew cold and greasy on the passenger seat. The lie was so blatant, so careless. The darkness of the building screamed the truth at me, a truth I had probably been ignoring for years. My mind, the part of me that had been dormant for decades, the sharp, intuitive part I'd traded for domestic comfort and the role of Mrs. Richard Vance, woke up with a terrifying, painful clarity. The Find My Family app. I'd insisted we install it last year after Richard had taken a wrong turn during a ski trip in Colorado and gotten lost for a few hours. He'd grumbled, calling it his digital leash, but relented when I'd framed it as a safety measure. Now, that leash was my only guide. I opened the app, my thumb shaking so hard I had to try 3 times. The map loaded. The blue dot representing his silver Lexus LS wasn't downtown. It wasn't on the highway home to Lake Forest. It was blinking steadily, parked in a quiet residential neighborhood in Naperville, a suburb 40 minutes away. A place we had no friends, no family, no investments, no reason to ever visit. Every mile I drove on the I-55 felt like peeling a layer of skin off my own body, revealing something raw and exquisitely painful underneath. The woman who left Lake Forest was a wife. The woman arriving in Naperville was something else, something raw and undefined, a spectator at her own execution. The neighborhood was idyllic, almost offensively perfect. Tree-lined streets, large craftsman-style homes with wide front porches, and perfectly manicured lawns, illuminated by antique-style streetlights. The kind of place where happy families lived their perfect lives. The GPS led me down a quiet cul-de-sac. And there, parked in front of a deep cobalt blue 2-story house, was Richard's Lexus. I killed my headlights and parked 3 houses down, my heart a trapped bird in my chest. There was a light on the 2nd floor, in what looked like a master bedroom. Shadows moved behind the crisp, white lace curtains. My mind was trying to process the scene, but it was like trying to assemble a puzzle with pieces from a different box. This wasn't the house of any colleague I knew. It wasn't a hotel, nor an anonymous apartment for a cheap, clandestine affair. It was a home, a family home, complete with a basketball hoop over the garage and a welcome mat. Then I saw her, a woman, not a girl, as I had half feared, but in her mid-40s, peeking out the 2nd floor window. Her hair was pulled up in a messy bun. She was wearing a silk robe, a beautiful emerald green. My breath caught in my throat. It was identical to the one Richard had given me for our last anniversary, only mine was a deep wine red. He had told me he'd had it special ordered from a boutique in New York. The woman looked down at the street not with suspicion, but with a look of simple domestic contentment. Then, a boy appeared at the window next to her. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old. He had dark, wavy hair, and he cocked his head to the side with a curiosity that was so painfully familiar, it stole the air from my lungs. It was Richard. It was Richard as a boy, the Richard from the old black and white photos his mother kept. The woman put her arm around the boy, laughed, and they both disappeared from view, likely heading to bed. My phone vibrated in my lap, making me jump. A text from Richard. Just finished. So tired. Leaving the office now. Don't wait up. Love you more than anything. The lie was so profound, so complete, it was almost impressive. He was texting me from that house, from her bed, while I sat in the dark, watching. The words, "I love you," had become meaningless weapons. I don't know how long I sat there. I must have fallen asleep, my head slumped against the window, the cold steak congealing next to me. I woke up with a sharp pain in my neck. It was 5:47 a.m. The sky was a bruised, pre-dawn purple. The blue house was still there, proof it hadn't been a nightmare. Richard's Lexus was gone. I drove home on autopilot. The familiar route back to Lake Forest, the stately homes, the manicured perfection of my life, all seemed like a movie set, a facade. I arrived just as Richard was walking through our front door, briefcase in one hand and a box from Do-Right Donuts in the other. He always brought me cronuts after a long night, my favorite treat. "Morning, Ellie," he said, kissing me on the cheek. His skin was warm, his scent a mix of his familiar cologne and something else. Soap, a different soap. "I brought your favorites, the pistachio Meyer lemon. I know I shouldn't have worked all night, but you know how these New York guys are." Vultures? His performance was impeccable. If I hadn't seen what I saw, if I didn't know what I knew, I would have believed every single word. I would have felt sorry for him. I wondered, in that moment, how many mornings, how many years, he had walked through that door with lies wrapped in bakery paper. "How thoughtful, darling," I replied, surprised by how normal, how steady my own voice sounded. "Why don't you go grab a shower?" "You must be exhausted. I'll make the coffee." He nodded, humming that little tune he always hummed when he was in a good mood. The same melody I'd listened to for 4 decades, not knowing it was the song of his successful deceit. The moment the shower water started running, I moved. The old Eleanor, the trusting, naive wife, had died in that car in Naperville. A new woman, a cold, methodical stranger, was in her place. I went straight to his briefcase. I knew the combination. It was our anniversary. 10 of 24. I found the usual work documents, his tablet, company pens. But in a hidden compartment I'd never known existed, zipped into the lining, was a second phone. A simple, prepaid smartphone. I powered it on. The screen lit up. The wallpaper was a photo of the 10-year-old boy, smiling, wearing a Little League baseball uniform. The team was the Naperville Nighthawks. There were several missed calls from home, and a text thread from a contact labeled B. I opened it. "Daddy, don't forget my game on Saturday. You promised! Mommy says you'll be there. Love you, Josh." Daddy, Mommy, Josh. The frame of my life didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces. The frequent business trips that were always 3 or 4 days. The weekends he had to work. The calls he'd always take in the yard, walking away from me. The credit card charges I'd assumed were for clients. The jewelry store purchase he'd claimed was for his assistant's retirement. I had been so stupid, so trusting, so completely and utterly blind. No, I corrected myself. I hadn't been stupid. I had been a wife who trusted her husband. I had chosen to believe. I had chosen not to see, because the alternative was unthinkable. I remembered, with painful clarity, our daughter Sarah, 10 years ago, saying she thought she'd seen Dad at the mall in Oak Brook with a woman and a little boy. "Must be a colleague's family, honey," I'd replied, dismissing it. "Your father is always helping people." Sarah was 15 then. The boy, Josh, would have been a baby. The math was cruel in its precision. I heard the shower turn off. I put everything back. The phone zipped away, the briefcase closed, every object exactly as I had found it. I had learned a lot about deception in the last few hours. When Richard emerged from the bathroom, hair damp and smelling of the expensive cologne I faithfully bought him every Christmas, I had the coffee poured and the cronuts on a plate. "Sleep well?" he asked, biting into a donut while scrolling through the news on his iPad. The picture of domestic bliss. "Like a baby," I lied, the false words coming with terrifying ease. "And you? Did you get any rest at the office?" "Slept a couple of hours on the sofa in the conference room," he replied, not even looking up. Bill was snoring like a bear in the next office. I remembered Bill. His supposed partner on these late-night projects. Bill had retired 6 months ago. We had thrown him a massive party at our house. Richard had given a moving speech about 2 decades of teamwork and loyalty. The irony was so acidic, it made me nauseous. "Eleanor? Are you all right? You look pale," Richard said, touching my forehead with a concern that seemed infuriatingly genuine. "Just tired, dear." I smiled. Just a little tired. I waited 3 days. 3 days in which I perfected my own performance. I smiled at his jokes. I responded to his lies with the expected credulity. I even made love to him one night, my eyes wide open in the dark, imagining the other woman in my place, my skin crawling. He suspected nothing. After all, I had been predictable for 40 years. Eleanor, the devoted wife. Eleanor, the perfect mother. Eleanor, the fool. This time, I was prepared. I dressed in clothes I wouldn't normally wear: jeans and a simple t-shirt, a baseball cap pulled low over my hair, and large sunglasses. I drove a different car, our son Michael's old Jeep, which we kept in the third bay of the garage. I looked like another person, and perhaps I was. I arrived at the Blue House at 2 in the afternoon. Richard was definitely at his real office. I had called his direct extension to check. The neighborhood was quiet, the Wednesday afternoon hum of lawnmowers and distant traffic. The woman, B, came out at 2:30. My heart almost stopped, not just because of her, but because of what she carried. A baby, strapped to her chest in a front carrier. A baby who couldn't be more than 6 or 7 months old. The mathematics of betrayal suddenly became more complex. It wasn't just the 10-year-old boy. He had a new baby with this woman. I followed her on foot as she started walking through the neighborhood. I kept a careful distance, pretending to look at my phone. She walked to a small park, but then diverted to a local Starbucks, one of those cozy suburban ones with a patio. I sat at a table far away, ordering a coffee I had no intention of drinking. She met 2 other women, both with strollers. I listened to them talk about the mundane, universal trials of motherhood: diapers, sleepless nights, the exhaustion. And then, one of them said something that chilled my blood to the bone. "Brenda, you are so lucky. Mark is so involved. Not all husbands are that dedicated." Mark. My Richard was Mark in this life. "Brenda?" Brenda laughed, adjusting the baby in her carrier. "Oh, he's wonderful. Though with his work schedule, it's complicated. He sometimes has to travel for business 3 or 4 days at a time." Those business trips were when he came back to me, to his other life, to his first real family. We were shifts on his elaborate calendar of deceit. "And how's Josh doing with the new baby?" another woman asked. "Jealous at first," Brenda replied. "But Mark, my husband, has been incredible. He bought him a new baseball glove, and they spend every Saturday afternoon together at the batting cages while I rest with the baby." Saturday afternoons. The client golf games that Richard never missed. Another puzzle piece fitting into place with nauseating precision. I got up to leave, but as I passed her table, Brenda took out her phone to show her friends a photo. I couldn't help but glance. There was Richard, my Richard, in a family photo on a beach in Florida. He was tan, smiling, carrying Josh on his shoulders, while a visibly pregnant Brenda smiled beside him. I recognized the resort. It was the same one where Richard had attended a crucial corporate leadership retreat the previous year. I stumbled out of the Starbucks, my vision tunneling. On the way back to my car, I passed the park again, and I stopped dead. I heard a familiar voice. "That's it, champ. Level swing. Attaboy." It was Richard, my Richard. Richard, who was supposed to be in a meeting with Japanese investors, dressed in a polo shirt and khaki shorts, coaching a youth baseball team. Josh, the boy from the window, ran towards him with a smile that was a perfect mirror of his father's. "Did you see that, Dad?" "I saw it, Josh. Perfect hit. I watched this man I thought I knew better than myself. I watched him be the father he had been with our children, Michael and Sarah, when they were small. But he was different, more relaxed, more real. This wasn't acting. This was a father, genuinely loving his son." Who was the real Richard? The man who ate breakfast with me in our sterile Lake Forest kitchen? Or Mark, the man who coached baseball on a sunny Wednesday afternoon? Did a real Richard even exist, or was he just a series of carefully crafted versions for each audience? My phone rang. It was him, from the baseball field. "Hey, Ellie." "Meeting just wrapped. It was brutal." "Do you want me to pick something up for dinner?" I looked across the park, where he was ruffling his other son's hair. "That would be perfect, darling," I said, my voice smooth. "Bring home that Napa Cabernet we both like, the one from Stag's Leap." "I know the one." I love you, Eleanor. I love you too, Richard, I replied. The words turned to ash in my mouth. That night, as Richard slept peacefully beside me, his breathing deep and even, like a man without a single care in the world, I got up and went to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror, 62 years old, 40 of them devoted to a man who had built a double life with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. The tears finally came. Not loud, racking sobs, but silent, hot tears that I had to muffle with a towel. I wasn't just weeping for the betrayal. I was weeping for the woman in the mirror. Who was I without him? Who had Eleanor been before she became Mrs. Richard Vance? The memories of my youth seemed to belong to another person. The girl who wanted to be a painter. The girl who had won a scholarship to the Art Institute of Chicago. Who had dreamed of a studio in Florence. The girl who had given it all up because Richard had convinced her that starting a family was more important. The art will always be there, Ellie, he'd said with that smile that melted my defenses. But the time for children won't. I had packed away my brushes. I had traded canvases for carpools and galleries for PTA meetings. I didn't regret my children. Michael and Sarah were the best things in my life. But what had become of Eleanor, the artist? She had completely, utterly dissolved into Eleanor, the wife. The next day, while Richard was at his real office, or perhaps his parallel life, I could no longer be sure. I did something I hadn't done in 30 years. I went up to the attic. There, in dust-covered boxes, I found my old art supplies. The brushes were stiff, the paints dry, but the sketches were still there. A portfolio of a talent I had abandoned for love, or what I had believed was love. That afternoon, I did something I had never done. I hired a private investigator. A discreet man, Mr. Sterling, recommended by a friend who had gone through a difficult divorce. I need to know everything, I told him, sitting in his sterile downtown office. How long, how it started, everything. Are you sure you want to know everything, Mrs. Vance? He asked, his voice heavy with the experience of shattering lives with the truth. Yes, I replied, though I wasn't sure of anything, except that I couldn't keep living in this play. Mr. Sterling came to my house a week later. Richard was on one of his business trips, which I now knew meant he was playing Happy Family in Naperville. Sterling laid a thick folder on my dining room table, the same table where we had celebrated 40 Thanksgivings, 40 birthdays, a lifetime of lies. Mrs. Vance, he began, his voice professionally compassionate. What I'm about to show you is not easy to digest. I nodded, my hands trembling as I opened the folder. The first page was a marriage certificate. Mark Peterson had married Brenda Stanton 12 years ago. Marriage? I stammered. Not an affair? A mistress? No, Mrs. Vance. A wife. This is bigamy. But how? That's illegal. He used a false identity. A fake social security number, a fake driver's license. As far as the state of Illinois is concerned, Mark Peterson is a real person. A person who is legally married to Brenda Peterson. Your husband, Mrs. Vance, is a professional. The following pages were worse. Photographs of Richard and Brenda's wedding. An intimate ceremony on a beach in Florida. She was in a simple white dress. He had that smile, the one I thought was only for me. Birth certificates. Joshua Richard Peterson, born 11 years ago. Chloe Ann Peterson, born 7 months ago. There's more, Sterling said, moving to another section. Your husband owns properties under his alternate identity. The house in Naperville, a condo in Miami, a cabin in Wisconsin. All paid for in cash. No suspicious mortgages. My inheritance, I whispered. My mother's inheritance. a considerable sum left to me 15 years ago, which Richard had wisely invested for our retirement. Now I knew where that money had truly gone. He had funded his other life with my dead mother's money. "How is this possible?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "How can someone live like this for so long?" "He's meticulous," Sterling said. "He runs 2 businesses, Vance Capital as Richard and a smaller, very successful consulting firm as Mark, which justifies his additional income and his absences. It's brilliant in a twisted way." "There's one more thing you should know," Sterling said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "The other woman, Brenda, she doesn't know about you?" "What do you mean?" "To her, her husband, Mark, is a widower. The story he told her is that his first wife, Eleanor, died in a tragic car accident 15 years ago. I was dead. In Richard's parallel life, I was a ghost. He had metaphorically killed me so he could have another." I stood up abruptly, ran to the guest bathroom, and vomited until there was nothing left but bitter bile. When I returned, Sterling asked, "What do you want to do with this information, Mrs. Vance?" "We can go to the police. We can file for divorce." I looked at the file. The dead wife. The stolen inheritance. The 2 children. The 12 years of marriage. "I'm not going to the police," I said, surprised by the cold, clear steel in my own voice. "And I'm not filing for a quiet divorce. I'm considering justice." "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "I need you to find every penny, every account, every investment, every single hidden asset." I spent the next 3 days in a suite at the Peninsula Hotel, telling Richard I was visiting my sister in Boston. I needed space. I needed to plan. In the solitude of that beautiful, impersonal room, with Sterling's folders spread across the king-sized bed like the evidence of a crime, I made the decision that would change everything. I was not going to be a victim. I was not going to cry silently while Richard continued his double life. I was not going to disappear discreetly, the dead wife he'd already created. I was going to systematically, publicly, and financially destroy the house of cards he had so carefully built. First, I needed allies. I called Michael, my son, a corporate attorney in Chicago. "Michael, I need your professional help with something delicate. Can you come to the Peninsula, room 1012, and don't tell your father?" He arrived in an hour, his face creased with worry. "Mom, what's wrong? Why are you in a hotel?" I didn't speak. I just handed him the folder. I watched his face transform from confusion to disbelief, then to a cold, quiet rage that I recognized as my own. "I'm going to destroy him," he finally said, his voice lethal. "Bigamy is a felony, fraud, tax evasion, document forgery. I'll have him disbarred. I'll have him jailed." "I don't want him in jail, Michael," I said softly. "Not yet. I want something worse. I want him to lose everything he values, and I want him to have to live to see it." Michael looked at me with a new, profound respect. "What do you have in mind?" I laid out my plan. It was complex. It required patience, acting, and a cruelty I didn't know I possessed. "We'll need Sarah, too," he said, his mind already working. "She handles public relations for that big firm in New York. She'll know how to manage the media aspect when this explodes." Sarah reacted differently. She cried for an hour, then she got angry, then she cried again. "How could he do this to us?" "To you?" But when she calmed down, her strategic mind took over. "We need to control the narrative, Mom. When this comes out, and it will come out, we need Dad to be the undisputed villain. We need to frame you as the survivor." I needed one more ally. I called Richard's sister, Deborah. We had always been close. Deborah listened in silence on the phone as I told her everything. Then She let out a long, heavy sigh. I always knew something wasn't right with him, Eleanor. The trips, the excuses. I thought it was a simple affair. I never, ever imagined this, that monster. Deb, I need access to your mother's safe deposit box, I said. Deborah was the executor of my mother-in-law's will. Eleanor, Deborah said after a pause, Mom always loved you more than him. She used to say you were too good for Richard. You'll have whatever you need. The plan took shape over the next 6 weeks. I hired a second investigator, a forensic accountant. He discovered that Richard had been systematically evading taxes for 15 years, using his double identity to conceal income. He also found the grand prize, a hidden account in the Cayman Islands containing over $5 million. Money from my mother's inheritance. Michael prepared the legal documents, not for an immediate divorce, but to freeze every single asset at the precise moment. Sarah cultivated contacts in the media, preparing them for the story of the year. And Deborah? Deborah found the smoking gun. In her mother's safe deposit box, she found the real will of my father-in-law. Not the version Richard had submitted. In the original, everything was left in a trust for the grandchildren, with me, Eleanor, as the sole administrator. Richard had forged documents to inherit everything himself. Another federal crime. I returned home to Lake Forest and to my role as the devoted wife. Richard suspected nothing. Why would he? His arrogance had made him careless. You're radiant lately, Ellie, he told me one morning, hugging me from behind while I made coffee. What's changed? I've just decided to value what we have, I replied, my voice poisoned honey. Life is short, don't you think? The next 6 weeks were a masterpiece of performance. I cooked his favorite meals. I initiated sex with an enthusiasm that delighted him. I was the Simone of our honeymoon, but with a dark, cold purpose he couldn't imagine. Jamal called me. Everything's ready, Mom. The documents are prepared. Sarah's contacts are waiting. The IRS has been anonymously notified. We're just waiting for your signal. Friday, I decided, at the anniversary party. Our 40th anniversary was in 2 weeks. Richard, in a fit of largesse, had planned a massive, extravagant party. He had reserved the entire signature room on the 95th floor of the Hancock Building. He had invited 60 of our closest friends, family, and most importantly, his biggest business partners. It would be public. It would be devastating. It would be perfect. The night of the party, the signature room shimmered. The city of Chicago glittered like a carpet of diamonds 95 floors below. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light. A string quartet played softly. I wore a blood-red dress, a daring custom design that hugged my figure. My hair was styled in an elegant chignon. The diamonds my mother had left me, the ones I'd retrieved from our safe, sparkled at my neck. Richard wore his finest Italian tuxedo. He couldn't take his eyes off me. You are absolutely spectacular, Eleanor, he whispered, kissing my hand. The most beautiful woman in the room. 40 years, and you still take my breath away. And you, I replied, my smile perfect, are the biggest liar. But I only thought it. I said, You're not so bad yourself, my love. The 50 guests mingled, drinking vintage champagne. Richard's main partners, the ones whose money was tied up in his firm, were all there. Our children, Michael and Sarah, were there, their faces composed masks. Deborah was there, watching her brother with sad, hard eyes. At 9:30, as dessert was served, Richard stood up, tapping his glass with a knife. The quartet stopped. All eyes turned to him. Dear friends, family, he began, his voice rich and deep, the voice that had seduced me 4 decades ago. 40 years ago, I married the love of my life. Eleanor has been my anchor, my confidant, my partner in every adventure. These years haven't always been easy. But Simone, my Eleanor, has been my safe harbor in every storm, the light that guides me home every night. The irony was so bitter I had to take a sip of water. The light that guided him home. To which home? And that's why, Richard continued, pulling a blue velvet box from his pocket, I want to renew my vows. Right here. He opened the box, revealing a massive new Eternity Diamond band. Eleanor, will you do me the honor of continuing to be my wife for another 40 years? Applause erupted. Women were dabbing their eyes. It was the perfect romantic climax. I stood up slowly, a wide smile on my face. I let him slide the new cold ring onto my finger. I kissed him, a long, lingering kiss for the crowd. Of course I will, darling, I whispered. Then I turned to the microphone. My turn, I announced, my voice clear as the crystal I was about to shatter. The room quieted. Thank you, Richard. That was beautiful. 40 years is a long time. Time enough to know every secret, every truth, and every lie about a person. And I've prepared something very special for tonight, too. I pulled my phone from my evening bag. Michael had already discreetly connected it to the restaurant's professional audio and projection system. A gift not just for my husband, I said, but for all of you, because a 40th anniversary requires absolute transparency. I pressed play. Richard's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. It was a recording I'd captured from his secret phone. Brenda, my love, I'm heading home now. Yeah, I know Josh has his game tomorrow. Don't worry. I told Eleanor I have a conference all weekend. She never suspects a thing. Trust me, after 40 years, she's so blindly trusting. It's almost pathetic how easy it is. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was Richard's champagne glass, falling from his numb hand and shattering on the floor. What is this, Eleanor? He stammered, his face draining of all color. Oh, but wait, darling, I interrupted, my voice now sharp as the broken glass at his feet. There's so much more. The massive projection screens on either side of the room, which had been showing a slideshow of our 40-year-long life, suddenly changed. Slide 1, Marriage Certificate. Richard Vance and Eleanor Hayes. October 24th, 1985. Slide 2, Marriage Certificate. Mark Peterson and Brenda Stanton. June 12th, 2013. A collective gasp went through the room. Slide 3, Birth Certificate. Joshua Richard Peterson. Father, Mark Peterson. Slide 4, Family Photo. Richard/Mark, a pregnant Brenda, and a young Josh on a beach in Florida. The date, August 2021. The date of his corporate leadership retreat. Slide 5. Bank Statement. Cayman Islands Trust. Balance, $5,104,328. 40 years, I said, walking slowly around Richard, who remained frozen, a statue of a man. 40 years of living with a bigamist, a pathological liar, a criminal. Yes, dear friends, a criminal. Eleanor, please, he finally choked out, lunging for me. We can talk about this privately. Michael stepped between us. Don't touch my mother. As her legal counsel, I advise everyone to stay seated. Dad, you've just been witnessed committing bigamy, felony fraud, and tax evasion. The IRS already has copies of all your financials, including that Cayman account. Richard's main business partner, a man named Devon, stood up, his face purple with rage. You used our firm's information, that consulting company. You son of a bitch! Deborah stood up then, her voice trembling but firm. And you forged Dad's will, Richard. I found the real one. Everything goes to a trust. Administered by Eleanor. You have nothing. It was the final blow. Richard slumped into a chair, the powerful man reduced to rubble. With trembling hands, he looked at me, his eyes pleading. I pulled the divorce papers from my bag and slid them onto the table in front of him, along with a pen. You have two choices, Richard. You sign these documents right now, relinquishing all claims to all assets, or you go to federal prison for the rest of your life for bigamy, wire fraud, forgery, and tax evasion. Your choice. He stared at the papers. His entire life, his empire, his two families, all gone in 10 minutes. With a shaking hand, he took the pen. As he signed his name, a single tear fell onto the document, staining his own signature. His final surrender. The events that followed were a blur. Richard was indicted. His company collapsed. His partners sued him. He was a pariah. He was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for his financial crimes. I sold the house in Lake Forest. It was full of ghosts. I bought a beautiful modern penthouse downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a large, bright room that I turned into my art studio. I did contact Brenda. She was a victim, just as I was. She lost her home, her husband, and the life she knew. I used the money recovered from the Cayman account, my money, to set up an anonymous trust for her and her children, Josh and Chloe. They didn't deserve to suffer for their father's sins. My art exhibition, Portraits of a Lie, opened last month at a gallery in River North. It was a critical success. The paintings told my story, from the blind, trusting wife, to the cold, calculating strategist, to the woman I was becoming. At the opening, a man approached me. A retired literature professor from the University of Chicago, a widower with kind eyes and a genuine laugh. Your work is painfully honest, he said. We had coffee, then dinner. Richard was released early on good behavior. He tried to contact me and our children. Michael and Sarah blocked his number. He lives in a small apartment in Joliet, working as a bookkeeper. A man without a past and without a future. This morning, I was packing. In the attic, in a box of my mother's old things, I found a letter I had never seen, hidden in the lining of her jewelry box. My dearest Eleanor, it read, if you are reading this, it is because you have finally set yourself free. I always knew the truth about Richard. I saw him once, with the other woman. But you were so fragile, so dependent on him. I feared the truth would destroy you. I was a coward. I am sorry. As compensation, I have left another account, one he never knew about, just for you. The key is where we always hid treasures. Live, my love. Live truly this time. Buried in her old garden, I found the documents. A Swiss account with enough money to live 100 lives. My mother had given me freedom posthumously. That trip to Florence was everything. I painted, I ate, I walked for miles, not as Richard's wife or Mark's ghost, but as Eleanor, just Eleanor. The professor, David, is meeting me in Rome. Life isn't over at 62. For me, it was just beginning. What do you think of my story? Have you ever felt like you were living a lie? Let me know in the comments below. If this story touched you, please hit like and subscribe to Aunt Millie's Tales for more stories you won't believe are true. Your support means everything.